So, Preston, we have a new Star Trek show out. It is Star Trek Picard, which I believe is the first Star Trek series to take place after Star Trek Nemesis.
Well, I mean, chronologically, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Star Trek Discovery, but I think that takes place before the events of Star Trek Nemesis.
No,
I mean,
actually, Star Trek Discovery takes place before the original series.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And
Uh,
I do not like
there,
Discovery. I'm not a fan.
there are glimpses. Actually, I will amend it and say there are glimpses of the late, actually after Nemesis in Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams one, because there are some when Spock explains his story with Nero
Oh,
and all
yeah.
of that.
Mm-hmm.
There is some of that.
Oh yeah, the Romulans, which is actually explored in this one. So they're actually keeping
Yes.
to what happened. So I guess yeah, the whole canon
There's
thing. Huh.
so I was really surprised when I watched it. I was really surprised how rooted it was in the storylines of not just the Next Generation, but other properties. And like random episodes. Like a lot of stuff is connected to random episodes of Next Generation, and there's references to Nemesis and the new Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. They're all referenced, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like plot points are taken from all of them. So it's surprising. It's very surprising how intricate it is with the old story.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't expect them to include like the J.J. Abrams plot points from what happened in
yeah,
Spock's universe, like the Romulan star going supernova and the failure to save
because
the thing.
because most of Star Trek recently, I mean, since J.J. Abrams and on, has been about we need to trash your dad's Star Trek and start something new because your dad's Star Trek is old and stale. And they're sure, old Star Trek is old and stale and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. But they we got to reboot it and do it and make this exciting and lots of actions and explosions. And so when I was watching Picard, I was like, oh man, this is gonna be crappy. And then I was like, whoa, this is like a continuation of a lot of different Star Trek storylines from all sorts of properties. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't I it was shocking. It was shocking how connected to the canon and the lore, and I'm not talking about like in a Star Wars sense where, oh my God, they used that droid that appeared in 5 seconds of Return of the Jedi, and it was the same model and I recognized that. No, like it was stuff from the past that is intricate to the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a build off of the other Star Trek properties. I mean, it's trying to be something new. It's going in its own direction, but it's amazing how connected it is.
Well, I'm binging Deep Space Nine right now, and I chose Deep Space
Yeah.
Nine because when I was younger, I could not get into Star Trek. I thought it was boring. As I got older, I still couldn't really get into Star Trek. I thought it was a little slow, but somehow I'm able to like really enjoy Deep Space Nine. And I think it's mostly the political aspect of it. There's always
Hmm.
war going around. There's always like spy stuff. It's like it kind of it's almost Game of Thrones in space with Deep Space
Yeah.
Nine, which I really enjoy.
Now, keep in mind when Deep Space Nine came out, there like TV was mostly still episodic. So
Yes.
for Deep Space Nine to go arc, and keep in mind it's not completely arc. Like they'll have a season and half of the episodes will be about the arc and then half will be episodic.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of getting through the episodic ones to get back to the arc.
You fucking just hit the nail on the head because I'm new to Star Trek. Like I'm very new.
Yeah.
I love Captain Sisko. Out of all the captains, and I've seen several Star Trek episodes from several series. Out of all the captains, Sisko's the man. I love Sisko.
No, he's great. He's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and I will say that's my fucking problem with Star Trek the most. Everything is way too episodic. So you've seen all the TNG episodes, right?
I have, yeah.
There's a
I've seen all of TNG, all of Deep Space Nine, all of Voyager, all of Enterprise. I have not seen Star Trek Discovery.
but you've seen Red Letter Media's review of Discovery.
I have. I have a gist of. I know, roughly what's going on. Yeah. If we reverse the polarity on, it's always the joke. Just reverse the fucking polarity.
Right.
Everything.
But no,
If we only have a 5% chance, well, we'll have to take it.
the one thing I hate about Star Trek, and this is so a couple years ago I looked up some of the best episodes of TNG because I didn't want to go through the whole thing. I just wanted to see like the cool episodes, right? There is one episode that I was recommended. I forgot the name of it, but I'm sure you'll remember. It's when Picard, this other human woman, 2 Cardassians, a couple Romulans, and 2 Klingons are on this planet, and they're looking for a thing. And I guess they activate this recorded message from an ancient being. And it essentially solves the whole sci-fi plot hole of how come every alien looks humanoid. They have 4 limbs, a head, a torso. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the episode's called The Chase. Yeah.
I think so, and I don't remember, maybe, but it essentially solves that plot hole. Like, how come all aliens in the galaxy are humanoid? They essentially resemble humans. Well, turns out they don't resemble humans. They resemble this ancient species that essentially seeded life across the galaxy, and we all have something inside us that kind of connects us together, which is a huge, monumental discovery. Oh my god. And it never gets brought up again. That's my problem with fucking Star Trek.
There's actually an original series episode that's that touches on the same thing, and so The Chase is actually kind of a follow-up of that. But that episode is a very good episode, which is why I remember the title of it. They're jumping around different places, and then I remember at the end, like the Cardassians and the Romulans are upset. They're like, I can't believe that. We would be, or no, it's the Klingons and the Romulans are really upset that they're related, but then the Cardassian calls up Picard and is like, maybe we have something in common or something. I forget which race actually calls him up, but they were upset, yeah.
And it never gets brought up ever again. There's another episode where I believe Scotty appears in it, and they find this insane Dyson sphere. Yeah. And it's like, this is a game changer. Oh my god, what the hell is this? And never brought up ever again.
But Dyson, that episode is really weird because Dyson sphere. I mean, they have to escape the Dyson sphere in that plot, but there's no reason for Scotty to be there at all. Just because they just wanted to have a person from the original series in there. Mm-hmm. But these are interesting points because with Picard, there are a few things that have always bugged me about the Data storyline in general, and I'm talking about all the extra stuff. And it's interesting that they're tackling all of this at once. They're pulling in a lot of different Data android storylines. One that I never understood why they didn't bring up, which is why is no one studying the body of lore? So Data was invented by this guy named Noonien Singh. He was a specific scientist who Noonien Singh, and he was developing Data on his own in a vacuum, and so he developed a few prototype models first before mastering Data. So he developed before he developed lore, and then he eventually perfected things with Data.
I'm sorry. I thought didn't Data have a daughter in the original series called TNG called Lol?
So Data had a daughter. Data tried it himself based on Noonien's work, and he also failed. Lol was unstable, just like lore was unstable, and that was it. Now this gets into some various things. So there's a Next Generation episode called Measure of a Man, where there's a trial in which this one scientist who is trying to get a hold of Data because he wants to replicate Data, because they were thinking they could use androids for dangerous missions. And so he wants to study Data. And Data's
I remember this episode. It's the episode where they have to determine whether Data is property or like his own self.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So they have a big trial, and in the end, Data convinces not only the judge but the scientist himself that, look, you're not allowed to study my body. I'm my own person. I don't want to spend my life in a lab. So the scientist goes on to continue his work, and he's successful. And so this is where synthetics come into in the plot line of Picard. These are invented by that scientist from that episode, Measure of a Man.
Oh, okay.
Right. This is why I'm saying this is actually like really obscure like connections. So then it's like, well, then who are this character, Laj and Soji? Is that it? What are the names? Dodge and Soji?
Dodge and Soji, yeah, the two androids.
So where do they come from? And the answer is, well, we don't really know. It's kind of a mystery that we're discovering, but they somehow are connected to Data. But then they're like, well, wait a minute, why was Data painting a picture? He has this painting of Dodge before, years before Dodge, was developed. Where did that come from? And some people think that picture that he painted is really of Lal. And that Dodge is not Lal, but some people think that they based her look off of Lal because he had this painting of Lal. Now they may have some other explanation because that painting looks a lot like Dodge and it doesn't look like Lal. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Not that Lal and Dodge look similar. They both have black hair and are,
right.
pale and, pretty, neutral features. But the painting is clearly Dodge. It's not Lal, and if Dodge did look like Lal, you think Picard would remember because he met Lal, so I don't know.
The whole crew met Lal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is just the first episode. So far, I actually kind of liked it. It got a little confusing every now and then because I gotta say this. Is it Picard or Picard? Because Q always called him Picard.
I have no idea. He's supposedly French, so it's however a French person would say.
So I guess it's
Picard. He speaks French in this episode. It's very funny. I asked, so my wife is fluent in French, and I'm like, so how's his French? And she's like, he sounds like an old British man speaking French. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so I gotta say, the episode was a little confusing. So I'm really happy that they're incorporating the lore from the JJ movies because I actually kind of like the JJ movies. I didn't like Into Darkness that much, but I did like Beyond and the original.
Right, but this is very clear that we're in the original timeline.
Right.
But the event of the Romulan sun collapsing and destroying Romulus and Remus happened.
Mm-hmm.
That event happened.
So the one thing I'm confused about is Romulus is about to be destroyed. Okay, fine. But here's the thing. They say at one point 900 million lives are at stake. So Picard wanted to do this Dunkirk-esque operation where he grabs 10,000 shuttles and he's going to go over there. And apparently synthetics hijack the whole situation, destroy the shuttles, kill hundreds of thousands of people, and the operation is abandoned because Starfleet can't spare any more resources to undergo this rescue operation. Not to mention, the Romulans are Federation's old enemies. Okay, fine. So what happens to the 900 million people? Do they all die? Do only some of them escape?
Well, clearly a couple are with Picard. So, these are clearly refugees, right? Mm-hmm. And they're clearly making a political statement about the situation that with something like Syria, we don't like the Syrian government, and the Syrian government has done a lot of bad things, but the people are innocent people, and these are refugees. This is clearly what they're saying, So you can't blame an entire people based on what a government does. You can't stereotype an entire people anyway. So I was a little confused on how the synthetics related to the Romulan plot, because the synthetics attack Mars, and the synthetics are somehow involved in the refugee rescue that Starfleet abandons and thinks that they don't want to do it anymore, and then they end up banning synthetics. after this too because of the attack on Mars. I'm actually a little shaky on how the attack on Mars was related to the
Romulan rescue effort.
the Romulan rescue operation. Like, why would anyone want to stop the Romulan I mean, unless there's some sort of space, Richard Spencer out there or something, who wants to stop refugees getting saved,
And you kind of, this
understand.
is kind of a brilliant move on their part in a sense, because you kind of have to, like, ban synthetics. You kind of can't have synthetics be a thing in the Star Trek universe, because then you have to ask the question, well, why do we even need, like, humans on those ships? Why not just send synthetics to do everything? And then it kind of gets a little boring, right?
Well, I mean, I will say it doesn't, like, the Star Trek plot doesn't really make too much sense, because since the big issue of, so that episode, Measure of a Man, there's a scene where Picard goes and talks to Whoopi Goldberg, and Whoopi Goldberg's like, all through history, there's jobs that, regular people just didn't want to do, dangerous jobs, horrible jobs. And so they always found a different class of people to do those jobs. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, if they weren't willing, they would then force them to do it. And Picard's like, oh, like, we're talking about slavery here. Like, he wants to create all of these sentient androids to be our slaves. And, there's this big, like, oh, crap. Which is, puts more stakes to handing over data. Like, do you just want to man all of these starships with sentient androids and then send them into incredibly hazardous areas to be your slaves? Well, I don't know. That's it's pretty serious when you put it like that. But the thing is, and this gets into Voyager, like, they invented photonic life at this point, like completely sentient people that are like Data, but they're made of light rather than being made of circuits. But no one would say, like, the Doctor, after running for 5 years, like, or so, was considered a complete member of the crew, like, not to be expended, like, a person with his own thoughts and dreams and everything. In fact, he even marries a woman and has children and all sorts of things in an alternate timeline. So why are they bothering with synthetics when they have photonic life? I mean, they could just use photonics, unless they got banned at some point, but they didn't, because Picard actually goes into the library at he talks to a photonic.
So I've never seen Voyager. I was told to stay away from Voyager because Voyager has like a worse problem with just things not mattering in the grand scheme of things than anything. The one I was told to watch a few episodes, ones involving with 7 of 9 and the Borg and all that stuff. So we once discussed this briefly. You mentioned that TNG was a pretty good show nonetheless, but they had to constantly include the Borg to shake things up, and they kind of wrote themselves against the wall in a sense with the Borg.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the original Next Generation, I think there's only 4 episodes with the Borg.
Which is crazy, because when I think of TNG, I remember the Borg being a part of it, like, a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, no, I mean, okay, not 4. There's 6 if you count the lore episodes with them, but there's not many. They don't deal with the Borg too much. There's an episode where they meet the Borg. Then there's a 2-parter where the Borg come to Earth, and then they defeat them. And then there's an episode where they find this young Borg named Hugh, who they liberate and then send him back to the collective. And then there's a 2-parter where Lore finds their cube that was cut off and takes them over and becomes their leader. But they're not really part of the collective anymore. So they're not, there's not that many, they're not really the Borg. Voyager, there's a lot more episodes with the Borg.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So this episode itself, I don't know, it was weird. I kind of did like it. The fact that we get the Borg again, or the Romulans using the Borg, because I think that at the end of Voyager, the Borg are dealt with like indefinitely? Like they're done? The queen is dead. They're all done?
No, I mean they're not. They're hurt bad. They're not destroyed completely.
Oh, they're not destroyed completely.
No. But she has a huge major strike.
Mm.
I mean, do you want me to spoil all of Voyager for you? Because I'll do it real quick.
Go ahead.
So essentially the galaxy is broken into 4 quadrants, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. Earth is, in the Alpha quadrant, but not that far from the Beta quadrant. But and so the next generation and all that lives in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. So Deep Space Nine, they find a wormhole that goes to the Gamma quadrant. The Gamma quadrant's ruled by mostly the Dominion. And then in Voyager gets somehow warped
To the Delta Quadrant.
all the way to the Delta Quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fairly episodic show, much more like TNG than Deep Space Nine is. At the end of season 3, they reach Borg space.
Mm.
And the big surprise is the Borg are getting murdered by this other alien race.
Species 8472 or something like that?
Yes. And so Janeway makes a deal with the Borg to kind of get past Borg space. So she makes a deal like safe passage for like a way to stop 8472. Because they figure out how to defeat 8472. And so, they get past Borg space and they start getting little jumps. So starting in season 4 to season 7, they start getting little jumps. Like sometimes they'll find a little wormhole or some character will push them, more years to home. I think they make it 10 years closer after the Borg space to get out of main Borg space. Mm-hmm. So they get closer and closer, and by the last season, they're like 20 years from home. And so the last episode is them arriving home, having done the flight 20 years. So they've been out there 25, 27 years total. But there's a lot of tragedy along the way. Like various characters have died along the way. And so Janeway is just riddled with guilt that she didn't get home fast enough. So she decides that she is going to go back in time with future technology.
I'm sorry, but this is something I've noticed about a lot of people complaining about Voyager. This is essentially the entire plot of Voyager. A lot of back in time things.
Oh yeah, and they even start making jokes about it. Like eventually
really?
This Federation, there's an episode where a Federation time ship from the future comes in and they're like, we hate Janeway. Janeway has been responsible for 8 major time paradoxes that we have to fix. You're like, whoa. So in the future, the Federation is super time traveling. So there's a lot of jokes about the time paradoxes with Voyager.
There's a joke someone told me that sums up all the Star Trek captains. Kirk would somehow seduce the alien queen. Picard would make a gripping speech about how he's right and everybody else is wrong. Sisko would somehow stare at the enemy until they surrender, and Janeway would somehow get her entire crew killed and then go back in time and fix it, and nobody would remember anything. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Pretty much. And Janeway, she's quite a cowboy. She's very she doesn't really care about the Prime Directive very much. She's just brazen. She goes back in time with future technology, and keep in mind the plot of the last episode of Voyager, which is entitled Endgame, is a very similar plot to Avengers Endgame.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
You've actually mentioned this before, actually.
Yeah. So she takes the future technology, she brings it back in time, she soups up Voyager, helping herself, and then says, I know a Borg trans warp hub. There's only 4 of them in the whole galaxy. It's a big deal. We're gonna go into this warp hub, we're gonna use it, and then we're gonna have a huge bomb explode as we go behind, crippling the Borg majorly and getting you guys home. And so that's her plan in the last episode of Voyager.
But the Borg are a thing now. I feel like I almost feel bad for a lot of TNG purists who probably wanted a Picard series without the Borg involved, because it seems like a lot of Star Trek fans don't like that the Borg are constantly used, and it's almost like the writers don't have any other really cool bad guys.
The Borg, I mean, there was a time where everyone was just so into the Borg. They're like, Borg, yeah. It was, they're like the Boba Fett
Oh,
like
really?
something that everybody's just obsessed with. They're like, oh, they're so cool. But writers kind of knew that the Borg were very limited. Um, what do you do with a mindless, single-driven force for expansion? Like, there's no depth to that. And so that's why they started changing the Borg quite a bit. Like, this is why, like, First Contact, the Borg has a queen, and all of a sudden it's a little different. There's now more emotion and involved. So eventually, I think the fandom caught on to that, because Voyager, because it wanted some ratings and it wasn't doing that great, decided, fine, you know what we're going to do? We're going to throw Borg all the time. We're going to have a Borg member of the crew, 7 of 9.
Yeah.
Borg, 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 Borg. And finally the fandom caught on to the fact that, like, oh, actually the Borg kind of sucks. Like,
Well, is it okay that in Star Trek Picard we're coming back to them kind of, because towards the end of the episode we see that the Romulans have made their home inside a Borg cube, somewhat of a kind of a destroyed Borg cube. I see like they have like force fields around like the destroyed areas, but like, has it been enough time without the Borg to reintroduce them kinda?
well, we'll see what they're doing. I think they're probably just using Borg technology, and that we won't see much of the Borg.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, the Borg, how they kind of left things at the end of Voyager is that the Borg are like, okay, we're sick of getting our ass kicked by the Federation. We're gonna retreat from that area. So I mean, it'll be interesting because you can tell that the writers, are we gonna, when we say the Romulans, like, what do we mean? Do we mean a specific group of Romulans? Do we mean the Romulan government? Like, what do we mean by the Romulans? Are all the Romulans going to be evil? Because that doesn't sound, because we've opened with a bunch of refugee Romulans.
Right.
So to all of a sudden say they're all evil would be a really weird, like, political statement.
Well, for some reason, the Romulans really want to go after Dodge, and they have some kind of interest in Soji. They have some kind of interest in these androids, because one of the first scenes with Dodge, Romulan Black Op agents are trying to, I guess, capture her, and if they can't capture her, their mission is to destroy her. And I gotta say, I love the action. Action is pretty cool. Seeing action like this in Star Trek after binging the hell out of Deep Space Nine, and I'm still binging it, is a little weird. It seems very J.J. Abrams' Star Trek.
Because they're not doing, there's the joke about the Star Trek punch, which they're always very consistent. The Star Trek punches of, like, you put your two hands and you clasp them together.
Oh yeah, I see. Oh god,
in a double fist.
Everybody loves using that move.
People.
Yeah,
yeah, it's great.
That move, and the fact that whenever a ship is being attacked, the console always explodes, and that's how the person gets injured.
Yeah, exactly. So they've changed things quite a bit. All of a sudden, we've got this character who can fight. Of course, they put a little hood on her because they're like, okay, we put the hood on, now we can put in the stunt woman.
And I gotta say, like, her going to Picard, I don't really understand why him of all people, because I love Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart's amazing. I grew up with him, because he was Professor X in X-Men. But Patrick Stewart, he's gotten a little older, and I feel kind of bad for the actor. Obviously, he didn't run up all those stairs, but my God, holy shit. Yeah. He just seems out of place with all the action.
It reminds me of, so there's this horribly bad movie starring Anthony Hopkins and Chris Rock. And it's this action movie. It's dreadful, dreadful movie on so many levels. But it's hilarious because Anthony Hopkins is ancient now, but he was still super old when they filmed this movie. And there's all these action scenes. But Anthony Hopkins is, like, fat and overweight and old. And, like, he can't do any of it. So, like, they'll keep doing these cuts where it'll show people run. And Anthony Hopkins will, like, fall, like, 50 steps behind as everybody else runs. But then they'll turn a corner and then he'll be back up with him, and then he'll fall like 50 steps behind, and then they'll make a cut, and it's like, how is he? He's clearly not keeping up. But yeah, Picard, he can't be in these action scenes. He's old. I mean, I will say that, and like Anthony Hopkins in Westworld, Patrick Stewart is clearly phoning it in, but him phoning it in is still so much better than an average actor.
I mean, does this new era of Star Trek have room for... Because he's obviously going to be the captain of a new ship, and it's going to be a ragtag crew of, misfits or whatever. Does Star Trek have room for a captain who isn't part of the action like in previous series? Because I remember in the TNG, once again, I've only seen a couple episodes here and there. I only saw, some of the... What critics would consider some of the best episodes of TNG. I didn't see all of it. But even in some of those episodes, he still kind of goes in with the action. Sisko goes in with the action. Janeway kind of every now and again. She's on the front lines every now and then. Kirk, of course. Archer, I believe someone made the joke to me once that Archer gets his ass kicked by every alien species. So he's on the front line. Is Star Trek really ready for a captain who kind of just has to sit back and just not really take the reins?
Funny... It depends if you're talking like Next Generation Picard versus Next Generation movies Picard. Because Next Generation Picard would always send Riker on the away mission.
Oh, okay.
And he would be the thinker, on the bridge. And so it was very different from the original series where Kirk went down to the planet, which is ridiculous, concept. Like, you're going to send the captain down to the planet, That's dangerous. So Picard never went on those missions. But then in the movie, all of a sudden, they turn Picard into action hero, which is completely not his character and but they just did it, Let's have them do dune buggies through the sand for some reason, him and Worf, and you're like, what? How? Let's have him with a machine gun, like mowing people down in a restaurant with the Borg. All of a sudden he's a very different character.
Machine gun.
Yeah, no, I mean that happened.
Oh, that really happened. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, in First Contact, he goes into the holodeck. He's running from some Borg, so he puts on a 1920s, 1930s world, and then he removes the safeties and then shoots a bunch of Borg with a machine gun. With a Tommy gun.
Jesus Christ. Well, I don't know. He just seems very out of place, especially when Dodge is doing all this kung fu and jumping 10 stories in the air, and just doing all this and laser beams flying all over the place. He just seems very out of place. I feel like he's just gonna be a spectator, and I don't know if everybody's ready for Picard of all people to just be a spectator this time around. Obviously, he'll be making his speeches.
I mean, I will say that he elevates the script and the plot quite a bit. Because there was a lot of really silly, I would say 12-year-old writing on how things got together.
How so?
Well, for instance, Dodge, we need to get the character of Dodge to meet Picard. And they just have her have a dream of Picard and then show up at his winery. And she's like, "Are you Picard? Who are you?" Why? There was no introduction. There was no organic way for these characters to meet. So she just shows up, and Patrick Stewart has to struggle and make that scene work, and he does. He makes that scene work, but it's one of the oddest things. I'm just gonna write a character having a dream, and then she's gonna need to find Picard because she had a dream about him, and so she's gonna show up at his winery out of nowhere. When does that ever happen in a story?
That's true.
But it was. But Picard, I mean, Patrick Stewart makes it work. Like I said, this is not his finest acting, but
he's tired, and
it's pretty good. That's what I'm saying. His bad day is better than everybody else's. Is most people's good days. So
I'm sure. I'm just surprised they tapped him to do this, because I tried Discovery. Discovery was just kind of I mean, I can't buy that this takes place before the original series. It just doesn't look it. It really doesn't. They were better off just placing Discovery in the J.J. Abrams universe, which I believe is called the Kelvin timeline. They were better off putting it in the Kelvin timeline, not in the original timeline with everything else, because just it looks and feels off. But no, I'm kind of excited for this show. The first episode I thought it was okay. I've seen better Star Trek, which is weird because I haven't seen that much Star Trek compared to you. But did you like the episode?
Yeah, I did. I think a lot has to do with expectations. I went in with super low expectations, and then I was really pleasantly surprised. I was like, wow, this is, well, first of all, it's a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. Like, they're dealing with a lot of different issues, science-wise, politics-wise. The acting was much better than I thought. It was linked into the plot of all of these other things. There's a lot of mysteries that made me want to watch next week because I don't really know what's going on. So I was really impressed. I don't think the average person would get it. But maybe there's enough that you don't need it, But you don't need to know who Lal and that trial where these synthetics came from. And I guess none of that's needed. Who B4 is and why the Romulan star collapsed and
well, the Romulan, they have a star empire, so I'm assuming... Because, like I said, that's the one thing that confused me about the episode. Because the reporter's like, well, the Federation was kind of hesitant at first to help out their oldest enemies. It's 900 million lives. Okay, fine. So did Picard ever get the rescue operation over there and bring them to Mars? And then the synthetics attacked? Or the synthetics attacked before the operation even began? Before the rescue ships went to Romulus?
No, for some reason the Romulan Empire is called the Romulan Star Empire. I don't know why. But then the plot at the beginning of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek is that their sun is about to supernova, and Spock has a solution to stabilize their star, but it fails, and the planets are destroyed anyway. And Spock being involved with the Romulans also comes from another Next Generation plot. There's an episode called Reunification where Romulans Vulcans are a shoot-off of the Romulans. And so he's thinking about trying to unify the Romulan and Vulcan people after their tens of thousands of years of being apart. Mm-hmm. And so he was, when we last see Spock, he's in the show Next Generation, he's on Romulus working for reunification. And so he really thought that if he could help stabilize that star, the Romulans and the Vulcans could have a future together. But he fails. And so Nero goes back in time and destroys Vulcan as revenge. And so in the Kelvin timeline, there's no Vulcan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, so far I'm fairly new to Star Trek, but I know enough to kind of get by. I know the Battle of Wolf, whatever. I know the Borg. I know Seven of Nine. 7 of 9 is probably the coolest thing to me about Voyager, and I was told to stay away from Voyager because I was told, given details, and even give me some right now that I wouldn't like it, and I kind of just am not excited about it. However, I do like the concept of 7 of 9. That's a super cool character. And it seems like Picard is going to integrate all the really cool things about TNG and Voyager that people enjoy. The Borg, Picard's speech making, the Romulan thing. I remember in TNG, the episodes that I did see, like the whole synthetic thing with Data being a huge thing, like him being kind of a bigger character than most of the crew.
Yeah.
Being super important.
No, Data's definitely the second character of the show after Picard.
Mm-hmm. I love Worf. Honestly, I just hope we get to see Worf again. Deep Space Nine made me love Worf, so we probably won't get to see Worf in season 1, but we'll probably see him in season 2, because I know Patrick Stewart tapped Whoopi Goldberg to come back as Guinan for season 2.
Really?
He went on The View and tapped her in and asked her if she would, and she said yes. So we probably will see Guinan again. I honestly just want to see Q.
His son is actually an acquaintance of mine.
Wait a minute. The fuck out of here. Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, acquaintance. I don't know him well, but yeah.
Dude, you do this every time. Like, you drop these, random ass, really cool information. You're all nonchalant about it. Get the fuck out of here. Hold on. Q Star Trek. Hold on. No way.
I'm sorry.
So you know Keegan Delancey?
Yeah, yeah.
Really? Wow. Oh, and me and him almost share a birthday, kind of.
He's
So
he's 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 a he's a foreign service officer.
get out of here. Really? Oh my God! Wow, that's actually pretty. Have you like discussed like Star Trek with him? Of course you have.
No.
No, really? What? That's like being buddies with Keanu Reeves and never discussing The Matrix or Bill and Ted's Awesome Adventure.
I mean, I haven't talked to him in years, and you know, it's just one of those things where it's like you know, you just figure he doesn't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. He has other things to talk about. Yeah.
Well, I think it was one episode of Star Trek, and I think it was the last
one called Q2.
Yeah, I believe it was the last Q episode. But I hope Q comes back because I really love Q. Q was a huge part of why I enjoyed TNG, despite him like appearing in like only a few episodes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's why he's in the first and the last episode and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's an important character, but they couldn't put him in too much because he is omnipotent. And what do you do with omnipotent characters?
I mean, I guess, but you could always have him like I don't think. Do you think Star Trek Picard will finally kill off the character of Picard?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
If they do decide to kill off the character of Picard, I would love for Q to appear right at his final moments. And like, if anything, like we've seen with Marvel doing it, like they can de-age people very nicely, and I'm sure they can de-age John Delancey fairly well. I would love to see Q again. Q, 7 of 9. We have the elements of the Borg in here. Data's legacy is in here. It seems like there's a nice recipe here for a good sequel series to the original Star Trek, TNG, and Voyager in a sense. I would love to see some of the old captains as well. Janeway, she should be in here. It's only been 19 years, I believe, since Voyager. And I think it's been almost 30 years since TNG ended. So I would love to see stuff like that. The one thing I will say I'm a little disappointed of is, once again, I'm doing Deep Space Nine, and there's a Dominion War going on right now in Deep Space Nine, and the Federation is taking loss after loss after loss. So I hope they kind of address that.
I'm trying to think, like, if it was addressed in the movies at all about those losses, because they mentioned the Dominion War in some of the later movies, like First Contact and such, but I don't know if they mention an insurrection. Oh, so the they mentioned the Dominion War in Insurrection, Star Trek Insurrection, but they easily could have brought it in more, because the Insurrection's all about a planet that can heal people. And it's like they could have been like, oh, we need this technology to heal all of our casualties from this war. But they never really bring that up. And everybody was kind of puzzled that they never did.
Yeah, that kind of bothers me. And it's weird because Picard, I believe, is in the first episode of Deep Space Nine.
He is, yeah. They try to make Picard and Sisko not like each other.
Mm-hmm. Because of Picard's time as Locutus, or how do you say that guy's name? Locutus?
Oh, right. Locutus of Borg.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually one of the inconsistencies of the show. So when the original Borg appear, they don't assimilate people. They grow their people in drawers. There's actually a scene where they open up a drawer and there's some Borg babies inside. Mm-hmm. And then later they're like, well, this isn't very interesting. They only assimilate superior technology.
Right.
But then they were just like, well, we want to have like Patrick Stewart dressed up like a Borg. So they introduced this idea of like them assimilating people, and then it just stuck. They changed the nature of the Borg.
Well, the first episode, like I said, I actually liked it. Scale from 1 to 10, I give it like what, an 8. Obviously, this is not your dad's Star Trek, like you said, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a spin-off or a sequel series, but clearly people who are fans of TNG are kind of a little iffy on this. As someone who just enjoys the political and sometimes warring aspects of Star Trek, I thought it was good. As a thing by itself, I thought it was. It raises some interesting questions that I'm actually curious to see, and I'm willing to give it a try. But I did enjoy this episode.
Yeah, it was good. It was good pilot. I'm looking forward to the second episode. We'll see how it goes.
Do you want to start covering Star Trek Picard every now and then? Wait for a couple episodes to pass and then get into it.
Whenever we can.
Because we got to get back to Fire and Blood. Everybody's getting fucking annoying.
It's true.
But Preston, thank you so much for joining me. Like I'm really getting heavily into Star Trek a little bit. You know, I'm finishing up Deep Space Nine. I might just try my hand at TNG again. I think you told me privately like I should start with maybe season 4 and go onwards.
Yeah, don't watch the first couple seasons, but unless you're like super into it. But yes, the later seasons are the golden ones.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time, maybe in a couple of weeks for a few more episodes of Star Trek Picard. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.